Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. I've got the fidgets today, and on days like that I usually potter about, wander around the garden, fiddle with stuff on the computer and just waste the day away. Alternative, get on and do something useful, boy. So that's what I plan on doing. I'm going to try and kill two birds with one stone. I had a request that is not far off impossible for me to do, but I will try. Somebody asked if I could have a chat about media. Everybody knows what I use, but obviously I haven't always used that. But anything I've used in the past has long since been dumped on the grounds that I didn't like it for whatever reason, past days. But all I can do is have a look at what I've got and have a chat about its fors and against, and also have a chat about the various medias that people use that I see on YouTube and Facebook and things. And anything that I say about any of those medias is my opinion, and it's biased because it's geared up to the way I grow in my grow room. So things that don't work for me doesn't make them a bad thing, it just means they don't work for me, and they may be great for other people. But I've tried many and different things over the years, and I've come up with what I like now. I'm not going to say I'm going to stick to that forever. Things change. Once upon a time we'd have scoured the planet for Osmunda tree fern roots to grow our orchids in, if you believe the 40-year-old books, and the plant would have been extinct by now. Things change, especially with medias. Simple explanation from my point of view is an orchid will grow in or on virtually anything as long as it's not toxic or harmful to the roots in any way. So if you've got an idea that you think might work, give it a go. That's all I can say. What I use now is the Orchid bark. This was recommended by too many people to ignore, let's put it that way. And all of those people had tried bark from various other suppliers with to one degree or another, and had all come up with the basic statement that if you're going to use bark, this is about as good as it gets with the stuff we can get in the UK. And even this, I believe, comes from New Zealand originally. So yeah, that's what I use. As far as my sphagnum moss is concerned, I use a New Zealand brand, not because it's the best, not because it's the worst, but because it comes from a supplier that I can get at. The guy comes to our shows, he tours around, and if I want anything from him, I send him an email and he brings it along. No postage. And that can cut your costs down dramatically. And he also supplies the Orchid bark. Well, he does at the moment, let's put it that way. So, I kill two birds with one stone. I keep in touch with the supplier, he's a good friend. He also brings plants along to the show to sell, and he gets some unusual stuff that you just don't see the other vendors around the show selling. I got an absolutely stunning Odontoglossum naeviem, which is a species, and it's a superb plant. I had to badger him for it, but because it was his show plant, because it was in bloom, but I got it. So I like the guy, and for me, he does pots, all sorts of stuff. He does all the supplies. It's Peter White. I think it's just called Orchid Supplies UK or something like that. But I get my stuff from him, but I don't buy it online. I get him to bring it to me and cut the postage out. Anyway, so this fidget day is going to be put to good use. Some things are going to get done that perhaps are not the right time, but they're going to get done anyway. I just want to knock some stuff off the list. So my scissors are soaking in the old 70% rubbing alcohol, as per usual. My hydrogen peroxide bottle is full, I'm going to need that, and I'm running out of that, I need to get some more. And I got myself a coffee on the go to keep me going. Very early start today. So what I'm going to do then, each bit of this is going to be separate, but I just wanted to do the media bit. So basically this little Dendrobium rhodostictum with this gorgeous little bloom, I don't know if I can focus on that, because it's wobbling. But irrespective of the fact it's in bloom, it has a lovely strong new growth on it, and underneath that new growth are the very delicate tiny little roots, because this is a very small plant. I don't like the feel, or I don't like what that's in, mainly because it's unknown. So it's coming out purely because I want to get that set up in some media that it can stay in for a nice long time and take advantage of those nice young roots pushing out now. There'll be more. They've only just started, so getting it settled now is a good time. So that's one. This little Hawiara is in a silly pot. Excuse me. It's in a clay pot with no drainage holes whatsoever. On the good side, it is a clay pot, and it's quite a porous one, I can tell, because the water evaporates out of the media quite fast. I've got a horrible suspicion when I try and take this out of the pot, underneath this coconut fibre, I think there's going to be another pot. I've just got a feeling. I think this has been stuck in a decorative clay pot to sell. I could be wrong, but that's another one that's going to get done. This Cattleya is about at the right time. It has new roots pushing out, and it has some new root growth down in the pot too. Now this is a weird one, because although all around the outside and down the bottom of this pot is my Orchiata bark, because when I got it I repotted it, but I didn't really repot it. I just took it out of the tight little crammed pot it was in and just gently teased a few of the roots away from a solid mass of going off sphagnum. But because it was in bud, I didn't want to disturb the roots that dramatically, so I potted it on. So all of this Orchiata around the edge, if it sticks to any of these roots, it doesn't matter. But I will need to get up into the centre of that and get all that old moss out and what will be a shed load of dead roots, no doubt. So that's that one. And then these two things, they annoyed me for the last time this morning. This has got two, I doubt if I can even get them in shot, silly long canes. This one is 2 foot long, and that one's well over 18 inches long. They're heading in opposite directions, and it's in a pot on a hanger. And wherever it is, it's in my way, and I keep bumping my head on it. And today I not only bumped my head on it, I knocked it off its hook and it fell on the floor. Didn't come out of the pot though. This is in old bark, so this media we can have a look at. This is not Orchiata bark. This was in the days when I used to use a different thing, and it should have come out of this pot a long time ago. I do see a couple of new root tips down in here, so I will need to be careful. It's going on a mount so that both of these hang in the same direction downwards and stop bumping in to me. Right, it won't even stand up. It's just annoyed me once too often this morning, so it's coming out of the pot. This one, I'm not sure if it's going to live. This is Dendrobium anosmum semi-alba. And there are no signs of life at the base of that plant. Nothing. This is also in the old bark that I once used to use. But I picked over the bark. When I potted this in here, I wanted a very open media. So I hand-picked the larger pieces. Yes, that was tedious. But this has signs of life on the canes. It has got 2 little kikis, one of which has just started to form a root. So the plant isn't dead, but it's far from happy. And I just don't think these roots are hydrating enough. An anosmum in its native environment at the moment would be getting rained on most days. It would be very hydrated, and this isn't. It's drying out far too fast. So by putting that on a mount, getting a reasonable amount of moss round the base, I'm hoping that that extra hydration will kickstart that. So that's what I'm up to, and as I said, I'll do this in shorter clips, a bit at a time, because I have got other things to do in the meantime. I'm in the middle of watering my vandas. I can't do one big long one, so it will be done in clips. So I'll be back shortly. Okay, we'll start with this little Hawiara potted in what looks like a very fibrous coconut fibre. Now, although I don't like the coconut fibre, I could live with that, because that's different to anything else I've seen before. are you going to come out? Doesn't seem to want to at the moment. Oh, that really is jammed in there. Okay, what we do now is start teasing away around the outside, being very careful to watch out for any little roots that there may be. This has just been jammed in here somehow. No orchid should be jammed in a pot like that. It just shouldn't be. If you think about it, they're epiphytes, and you know, they grow on the loose matter on tree branches and stuff. And although they become attached, they don't really become attached to the stuff that's sat on the branch that their roots grow into. They attach to the actual branch. Ah, it's just started to wiggle. Come on then, gently does it. Right, so whoever potted that jammed the coconut fibre in with their fist and made it absolutely rock hard, and then piled the plant in on top of that and packed it in incredibly tight. Strange little pot. I've never seen a pot quite like that. It's actually got a, yeah, you can probably just about see it. Down at the base of the pot it's much narrower. It's got like a sleeve. If that had a couple of drainage holes in, that'd be a nice little pot. It's got some signs of some mould on the clay. Clay gets damp and stays damp for a while. Right, as far as the little plant is concerned, it's got one old pseudobulb and the pseudobulb in bloom. How good are these roots? Not very good. Some are, quite a lot aren't. But in amongst it are going to be some good ones. There's some remnants of sphagnum in there, but don't see any new growing tips on the roots. So I'm going to have to rely on it producing some more in the not too distant future. And the way to encourage that is to get the sheaths off the... we have a little new growth. I hadn't noticed that. Little new growth just starting. Now that's its hope, that's its long-term future. Not this, and certainly not that. Quite honestly, to pot this nicely and sit it nicely with its base in the right place, there's a nice green tip there, so it has got a root. That pseudobulb's coming off. That's if it doesn't fall off on its own, which it virtually did. You know me, as soon as I get near a rhizome, yeah, that one's okay. So at least we're not worried about that. But then, you know, that got a spray yesterday, so even if it has had a problem, it's at least had some help to get over it. But yeah, that little new growth is not in the best place to get some roots out, so it's going to get a bit of help by getting that sheath off. Like that. Now if any roots come out at the base of that new growth now, they at least stand a chance of getting down into the media, and I will probably take, yeah, I'm going to take that off as well. Let's give it the best chance it's possibly got to get down in some new media. So there we go. That's what I'll be potting. I'll give it a clean up, and quite honestly I can feel most of these roots are not viable. Those are. Yeah, it's mainly these long spindly bits there, so I can trim a bit of that off and we'll get going. Right, let's put that in the sink out of my way and have a chat about this stuff. This is incredibly fibrous, so it's got air in it. Now, as coconut fibre goes, it doesn't seem to have lumps in it like a lot do. A couple of bits, not many, but any lumps that I've found just fall apart. Yeah, so it would all end up like that. Quite honestly, that is a viable growing media for some orchids. It's airy, but it's got lots of little like grass bits in it. So from my point of view, when that gets wet, that's going to start breaking down quite quickly because it's got no substance to it as such, which means it wouldn't last long. Now if you like repotting frequently and you find it fun, yeah, it's got some bits of sphagnum in there as well, then that would be a viable media. It's very friable. It actually smells of coconut, believe it or not. Well, it is coconut fibre, but it actually still has a bit of a whiff of coconut about it. There's no tenuifolia lurking in there, is there? No. Yeah, so I would use that. I would not reject that as a rubbish media. It's not bad. You'd have to be much more careful with watering with a substance like that. Yeah, see, there's a lumpy bit, and if you tug at it, it just falls apart. It's got no solidness to it. It's got no lumps that are going to stay as lumps for any length of time. But as medias go, I've seen a lot worse, and I've seen a lot worse of this type. So, yeah, that's not bad. Right, that's one. I don't think you're long for this world. There's no point in potting that up. No viable roots on it, and it's a shriveled back bulb that for me is not worth the effort. I've got enough plants without starting new ones, especially when they're little like that. Right, what else am I going to do then? Let's have a look at this one. Actually, let's not. Let's have some coffee. I get this one out of the pot, then I've got to go and sort Vandas out. Now, I wasn't expecting this little thing to bloom. I was expecting it to be a long way from blooming, so I was very surprised. This pot, whatever's in it, is topped with grit, sharp grit. Now that is a way of stopping the base of the plant staying damp. It's not a daft idea. However, what's underneath that grit is not nice. It is soggy, breaking down sphagnum. Now I'm really pleased I got that out. If you use sphagnum moss on its own, it will not last very long. It stays wet for quite a long time. Look at these roots, just ruined. And as a consequence, it will break down. So if you use sphagnum moss, and I know lots of people, there's a guy, one of our Masdevallia specialists, and although it's not across the board, he uses sphagnum moss for nearly all of his plants. He does add a bit of bark and a bit of perlite into some of them, depending on how fine their roots are. But he uses it all the time. He swears by, oh, look at that lovely new root, we'll have that one. We'll do our best not to break that. And that one. There was a couple of good roots in amongst that muck. Now, they were destined to die back. As they pushed down into that media, they'd have turned into like these. Now these are really wiry and they're not soggy. These are. Yeah, they just, pull off. There's the stringy bit. Easy to tell. Yeah, just give it a tug, and if it all comes off and leaves a bit of string behind. And for those of you that don't know, that little bit of string that leaves behind is in fact the actual root. This is not the root. This is the root covered in velamen. So, to be technically correct, this fibrous little thing in the middle is the actual root. The velamen is what holds the moisture and allows the root to take it up at its leisure, but it can store a fair bit compared with what these tiny little things would do. Nice evolutionary process. So I'm pleased I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nice strong roots coming out from underneath that new growth. So I'm pleased that I got that out of that pot now. Quite honestly, I should have got it out as soon as I got the plant. Still, there we go. So that's that one. Now, as far as that media is concerned, I've already discussed it. Once sphagnum moss starts to break down, you need to get your plant out. You will destroy your root system eventually, and then you've got to try and recover the plant. It just seems pointless. And if you've got your roots in sphagnum moss and you repot, you can usually just flush the old moss off under the tap. No, zero damage to roots, basically. Almost no disturbance, and then providing you're careful, actually, you know, putting your plant back in some nice shiny new sphagnum moss, and in that case that I would suggest that does need pre-wetting. I wouldn't recommend using dry sphagnum moss for potting or for mounting. It's the one thing that I use wet. I do wring a lot of the excess moisture out. So anyway, that was in pure sphagnum, very broken down. Good media, sphagnum, very good. Some people actually use live sphagnum moss. Now, from my point of view, knowing from a previous life what sphagnum actually is useful for, you get a wound in the middle of nowhere, shall we say, yeah, out on manoeuvres, whatever, and you get an open wound, you know, somebody will grab a handful of wringing wet sphagnum moss out of the bog and slap it on your leg and tie it on. It has incredible sterilising properties. Doesn't matter whether there's bugs in it or anything like that. That as a field dressing, it's absolutely brilliant. And if you use live sphagnum on your plants, it actually looks pretty because it stays nice and green. The downside is it hates fertilisers. So to pot in live sphagnum moss, you would need the type of orchid that really is a low feeder. And I would suggest that Masdevallias and Draculas would suit live sphagnum. They'd probably do wonderful in it. I am planning on getting some live sphagnum. I know where I can get some and not get arrested. Because basically if you take anything from the wild, technically you're stealing. But I mean, I know somewhere where I can go where it's alongside a land owner that I know quite well for other reasons to do with butterflies and things. So yeah, taking a bit of sphagnum off of his grassy bank along by his gate is not going to be a big deal. And I'm going to grow it in trays, and I may dress the top of some pots, but I'd have to be careful which ones I use, because if I dress the top of a pot that's going to get fed with a lot of fertiliser during the summer months, things like some of the dendrobiums, you know, feed and water well and all that stuff, it'll end up killing the live sphagnum. It just does not like fertiliser. And it also, in most cases, does not like alkaline water. It tends to grow in places that are slightly acidic, and in some cases very acidic. But yeah, I'm pleased that I've got some live roots on that, and I've caught that at a right time. So that's that one, and yet another type of media. Right, I'm just going to go and do a Vanda, and I'll be back. Right, let's get this anosmum out. Do you know this plant's never been happy? Never. It's never grown well for me. Just won't get going. One old root managed to come out the basket and go back in again. So that's what was holding it in there. Right. Media first this time, so I'll put that to one side. God, those roots look dry. Right, this is a type of bark that I used to use. The problem with it was it came in grades of fine, medium and coarse. And in amongst the coarse bark was quite a lot of fine and medium. And in amongst the small was quite a lot of large and medium. It was not sorted properly, it was done, but this is what you call bark that is no good to man nor beast. Also, when you're looking at a large bark, that's what you're looking for, chunks, not flakes. Flakes don't last, yeah? Flaky bits don't work, but chunky bits do. See that? No, it's not. I was going to say that bit's quite hard, but give it a twist and it falls apart. So this bark has seen better days. It is soft. Although when you're buying bark you can't actually do this because it will be sealed up in bags, or it should be. And that is a lot of what was wrong with this bark from the supplier. I used to sort of buy it. I bought some at shows and it was all in nice polythene bags, all done up at the top. But you can see this is just falling apart. It's rubbish. And that's exactly what my friend at the Orchid Society said. He said, "Oh, you don't want to use that, that's rubbish." Now I know why. At the time I didn't know why, because I hadn't seen any better. This is what I'd seen. So, you know, you sort of, in your earlier days, you tend to think that all bark's the same. Well, it flipping isn't. Made from different trees, different parts of the world. Some of it gets processed and treated in various ways. Don't ask me about that because I don't look into that sort of thing, but that is just broken down bark. But yeah, when I went to the nursery, to the place where I'd been buying my bark from, what I saw was huge open bins with a big scoop and a pile of plastic bags. So this stuff wasn't sealed up. I could see mould and things like that growing in places in those large bins, which would then get put in polythene bags and sealed up. It was also slightly damp. You know, if you're going to store bark, store it dry. That way nothing grows. Yeah. So that is a bad bark. That's what a bad bark looks like. It falls apart in your hands. And you can't do it when you buy it. That's the problem. You can only look at it. But, you know, if you're getting it personally from somewhere, you can ask if they use their own bark and see if it goes quiet for a couple of seconds before they answer. Because if that's what happens, then what they are going to tell you is no, they don't use their own bark, they use the good stuff. It'll be that sort of thing. But one day it's going to become harder to get bark. I mean, the Orchiata bark is sustainably sourced. I think that's the expression they use. That means there's a load of forest somewhere that weren't being used for much else, I suppose, and the timber is used for one thing and the bark was probably a waste product, and now they've found a way of making some money out of it. That's called good business in my book. Anyway, so that's what a bad bark looks like. But unfortunately when you buy bark you normally can't pick it up and do that with it. And if it's sold properly it will be sold dry. And when it's dry, it normally feels a bit harder. It's when you get it wet and it all starts falling apart in your fingers. So I've got dry, crunchy roots here. I do have a lot of them. These ones in the middle are soft and squishy. In fact, most of them are soft and squishy. See, it doesn't, on the surface, it doesn't look like a bad root system, but it is, because these are not viable roots. They're soggy. I bet if I tug them, yep, they just come apart. So I haven't got a good root system on this, despite appearances. So I'm going to trim it, and then I'm going to get it on a mount flat, like that. Yeah, so that the roots spread, I'll trim them, and what roots are there spread out and get hydrated. They may branch closer to the base, because you often find roots die back from the tip. They start dying down here, yeah? And then gradually, I mean, if you watch Ed's video, that cane's actually broken, so, and that's the one with the kiki on, that's a shame. If we hang it up, and the tissues are not too badly damaged, that'll heal itself. If I leave it bent, it won't. So we'll see what we can do with that, but quite honestly I don't hold out a lot of hope for that plant making it. Luckily I have a brand shiny new Anosmum Pure, not a semi-alba, that I got earlier this year that you've all seen, that looks like a much better bet for keeping an anosmum long term. And I also have my Nesta that is going on great guns at the moment and pushing up 3 lovely canes, and that's an anosmum cross, so it's not like this was my only one, and I've had it a while and it just won't grow. It's just, I'm almost thinking it's not even worth trying. But chucking it on a mount and watering it when I water the others is not exactly hard work. So that's what's going to happen with that one. I just need a break for a minute, another Vanda. Okay, let's have a look at this one then. This is Dendrobium glomeratum, and it's been in this pot far too long. Right, a word about algae. If you use clear pots and you've got bright light, you will get algae. It's not open to debate, doesn't matter how long it takes, eventually some algae will start to grow around the inside of your pot. It looks horrible. Technically it does no real harm. It doesn't harm your roots, but what it does do is aid the bacteria and everything that break down your media. Yeah? So it will speed up the breaking down process. And obviously part of the breaking down process, your media will start to turn acidic. So there's an easy way around it. If you use clear pots, stand your clear pot in a non-clear pot and shut the light out. That's all it is. Keep the light off your pot and you won't get algae. I live with it. So far I've seen very little algae growth on the Orchiata bark, or the pots that it's in, but there is some. It's nowhere near as extensive as on this older bark that I used to use, like what is in here. There are actually some new roots down in the bottom here. Big chunky stuff put on the bottom of the pot, already breaking down, even though that wouldn't stay wet for any length of time. Look at it. Yeah. So another example of, it's the same bark as what just came out of the other pot, and I'm not going to be able to get much of this out. I'm going to have to do this under the sink. Right, and the last one is this Cattleya. And this should come out of the pot quite easily. I'd have looked a right idiot if that was really jammed in there, wouldn't they? Okay, now I can show you what I mean. And this is going to be hard work, this is. This is the root ball. And inside there is a solid mass of sphagnum moss. The only few new roots that this has managed to grow are around the outside. Yeah? And they are attached to the Orchiata bark that I put round the outside. And they can stay attached to that Orchiata bark. It's relatively fresh, it's not breaking down. But there are new roots coming out from the base of the growths that have just bloomed. Here. There's one threaded its way in through there. There's one here. Yeah. So it is producing its new roots now. So now is the time to get at it. But what I want to try and do is not damage too many of these roots. These are nice roots. This is going in a holy clay pot full of chunky Orchiata bark. So there's no reason for those roots to attempt to be detached. But it's going to be very difficult getting these old roots out. And what I know is up in there, which is a solid mass of decomposing moss. And it might end up having to be the scissors. See, these roots aren't viable. These are all gone. I might just be able to show. Yeah, there we go. Look, there's the solid mass of moss up in the middle. That's what I've got to get out. There's no point in putting that in my nice holy clay pot full of Orchiata bark. So it's a teasing job, right up through the middle, a little bit at a time, just easing it out. I can use the tap to help me with that. And then these soggy roots, they're not all soggy, but a lot of them are. Yeah, there's your test. Just give them a tug. Yeah. So again, sphagnum moss is great, but don't leave it in there too long, and don't let it compact. I know that sounds, it's quite difficult. If you keep watering from the top of the pot, gradually as the moss gets older, it'll stay wet longer, and it will gradually sink. Slowly but surely it will sink down in the pot, and it will start excluding the air because it's becoming compacted. And that takes a while, Not a huge amount of time, but it takes a while. But that's the point you really need to watch out for with the sphagnum. It's at the point where it's compacting such that there's no room for any air left. It's starting to become a bit solid. And that's the time to repot. And like I said, you know, if you're going to use sphagnum moss, you must expect to repot a lot more frequently than with rock hard orchiata bark or with inorganic medias. While I'm there, inorganic medias, I've tried some. I didn't try the best and it didn't work for me. I had some leca beads, you know, the round clay ball sort of thing. I got them for humidity trays. I didn't get them to pot orchids in, but I thought I'd give them a try. And I don't know if anybody else has ever come across this. My leca beads don't hold any water. Zero, zilch, not a drop. You can stand them in water. They don't absorb anything at all. They're solid. So quite honestly, they didn't work. I also tried Ceramis. Now I will quite happily say if I'd got the large Ceramis, that might have worked for me. But I've got very high humidity in the air around my plants. I don't really need to have the roots sitting in water as well. However, you know, if I was growing in the home, you know, in drier air and having to work hard at keeping humidity up, that would be a different ball game altogether. And it might have proven good, but I could only get the little stuff. And it's like having a pot full of little razors. They're sharp. They've got little edges all over them. And they move. Every time you pick the pot up, you can see the media moving slightly. And those jagged little edges are not doing your roots a lot of good. Or that's my opinion. So the inorganic stuff didn't work for me. There's a nice new root broken off there. Grr. But that doesn't mean to say it isn't any good, because it is, and people are using it and making it work well. And then you've of course got the no media at all. Some would say that's the best media of the lot. Never breaks down, never goes mouldy, never needs repotting, and you know I'm talking about waterculture, as in, you know, pure, either semi-waterculture or full waterculture. No media. The only thing I will say about that is if you're going to try that, you will probably get a loss or two until you get your head round it. It's not something that you just do and it works first time every time. I've seen too many people who've been doing it quite a long time still have a bad one now and again. But nonetheless, it works. Now for me, where am I going to get 200 glass containers? And for me, I don't like the look of it. Now again, if I didn't have a grow room and I grew in the home, that would probably be well worth me trying, because you've automatically got some extra humidity because you've got a container with some water in. Even if it's not in there every day, it's in there some days. And that's giving off moisture all the time. And your roots have got something to hydrate from. So don't knock it if you haven't tried it, that's all I can say. I've seen it work too many times to knock it. It's not for me, that doesn't mean to say it doesn't work. So that's the ultimate media, none at all, just water. And it works, for some, it doesn't work for me. Well, it might do, but I don't want that in my grow room, lots of glass containers. Oh, I'm going to have fun getting that lot out. So that's a chat about media. What other types of media? Rock wool. Personally, can't stand the stuff. There are people at the Orchid Society, both Orchid Societies, that swear by it. Each to their own. I don't like touching it. To me, it should be up in the roof, insulating my loft. It's not for growing orchids in. But it works, yeah? It's a pain in the arse if you let it get bone dry, because it doesn't like getting wet again. So it's one of those things, if you've got a type of orchid that needs to stay medium moist all of the time, then rock wool's not a bad idea. Never breaks down. Repotting, just shake off loose bits and put it in a bigger pot, you know, so ease of repotting. What else have we got? Lava rock. Again, the only downside I can see on that, which is geared up to how you use it more than the actual media itself. Again, if you've ever held lava rock in your hand, it's sharp. It's rock hard. Yeah? And it's brilliant for orchid roots to get hold of, providing they get hold of it and it keeps still. So, you know, things like Tolumnias, you've got a little pot or a little open basket with 2 or 3 pieces of lava rock jammed in there so that they don't move, and plonk your Tolumnia on the top, and those roots will grow all over that lava rock and they'll love it. Yeah? But you get lots of pieces of lava rock and every time you pick it up they move, we're back to the ceramis with the sharp edges again. So again, you know, take a bit of care. What else? Oh, there's shredded sweaters. But then I've never seen that or have no intention of seeing it. Yeah, I've forgotten what it's called now. Synthic or something, or Zane uses it. Danny's got some lurking around in some of her pots, I think. But it's basically, the idea of it was a synthetic sphagnum moss that doesn't break down. Again, I think there are some re-wetting problems if it gets dry. But again, I haven't tried it, I haven't seen it, I haven't even seen it for sale anyway yet. But again, we'll go back, as far as media is concerned, orchids will grow in, on and around practically anything that's not toxic. And some things may seem innocent. There are certain trees that grow in this country, and you might find one of them fallen down with lots of loose bits of bark on. You think, oh, I could break that up and grow my orchids on it. Some of the bark on some of those trees have got toxins in them. It's a protective mechanism that the tree has evolved to keep bugs and beetles out and stop them chewing up the tree. So not all bark is good bark. Yeah. If you get some of our pine trees, like my bonsai Scots pine, the bark from that wouldn't be very good unless it had been aged for a very long time. It's got resins and all sorts of things in it that I don't believe would be that good for orchids. And yet some bark is nice and inert and works great. Okay, so a chat on media. I can't think of anything else at the moment. I'm bound to have forgotten something. But I use the Orchid bark. It's rock hard and I'm told it lasts for ages. But then I haven't been using it for ages. So I can't emphatically say it lasts for ages, but it's heading down that road already. I got my first lot of that, it's got to be over 2 years ago, and I started transferring stuff into it as and when it needed repotting. I didn't go mad and do it all at once. And so far the stuff that's in it seems to be doing okay. And the sphagnum moss I use is just the brand I can get easiest. New Zealand sphagnum, I'm told, is of a better quality than Chilean sphagnum moss. But then I've only seen one and not the other. So that's for others to say, not for me. But yeah, I mean, the difference with poorer quality sphagnum is it'll break down and compact faster. That's all it is, really. It's still the same sort of stuff. But what we're after is a media that lasts as long as it possibly can, so that your orchid gets disturbed the minimum amount of times at the minimum frequency, so that it can set up a really good root system, well established, strong new growths with good roots underneath them, so that at the point that you choose to repot it, when you can see more new roots growing, you don't do it so much. You don't give it so much stress, basically. That's what it's all about. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pot some of these, mount some of these, wash some of these and do stuff. I may or may not film some of that, so if I don't do any more today on the camera, then thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.